The Star, the Bucks announced yesterday that Khris Middleton will miss the remainder of the series with the Bulls due to a sprained MCL in his left knee.
Boy, this is going to be really feisty here because Chicago is a very good get-a-bucket team. They don't shoot threes. They're old school. They got a lot of guys that get a bucket. These are going to be tight games now.
Well, yes. Now, I think that Milwaukee will still win, but this is a serious injury. So he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. If the Bucks advance, this will provide a possible timeline for his return later in these playoffs. Over the past 2 seasons, the Bucks are 86-34 when Giannis, Middleton, and Jrue Holiday are on the floor together, including the playoffs. He's been averaging 20 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, shooting 37% from three this year.
You know, so I think we both compared Milwaukee a little bit to the Spurs dynasty.
Yes.
A dominating big who's a very good team-friendly guy, and surrounding players, Manu Ginobili, Khris Middleton, Jrue Holiday, Tony Parker, very good. All-star-ish. Very good. But we don't put them in the Showtime Laker class or the Warrior class or the Shaq Kobe class or the MJ class. Even the Heatles. They're not an all-time dynasty, but there's something there. Remember, we don't talk about the Spurs dynasty almost at all. We talk about all these dynasties. And I think where they're similar is the reason San Antonio's dynasty worked, and Popovich would rest guys before everybody else did, and they were always healthy and rested for the playoffs. They needed all their gas, like all of it. And if you'd have taken Manu Ginobili out in some of those teams in the playoffs, it's not the same.
Right.
And I don't. There's not as much room for error. And I just think Milwaukee's a team that could do a dynasty. They could win 3 and 5 years, but they don't have a ton of room for error. They don't have outside of Giannis, the two. Khris Middleton was basically a throw-in guy in a trade with Detroit. He's a good player. He's not Pippen. He's not Shaq Kobe. He had like 2 stars. I don't think they have a ton of room for error. That said, I still think they could win 3 titles in 5 years.
Right, but I think they need all of their pieces. I don't know that they can win, and it's going to sound dramatic because, yes, I understand how great Giannis is. But the deeper you get into the playoffs, the more time Giannis is playing, the longer these series are. It's a lot on your body on top of a long regular season. And you had a long season last season because you won the championship.
Right.
So you played all the way through the playoffs last year. You need all your pieces. And Khris Middleton is a huge component to this team winning.
Yeah. All dynasties aren't even. Like, we know the Cowboys dynasty, those teams were ridiculously talented.
Right.
Like, the Patriots were well coached with Brady, but outside of the Randy Moss years, they weren't wildly dynamic down the field. Like, not all dynasties are the same, and the Spurs and the Bucks have that feel like they could be a dynasty. One's already been a dynasty. But it's like a boring kind of methodical.
Well, the brands are not the same. The stars are not the same. It doesn't have the same
explosiveness.
Yes. Now, Giannis is an exciting player.
Yeah. But
he's still on a brand that isn't necessarily in that. Yeah. We don't speak about them in that type of air. But if they win back-to-back, that might change. But they're going to need Middleton to do that. He's just too crucial to what they do. Now, the series is tied 1-1. Game 3 is tonight in Chicago. The Bucks are favored by 3, according to Fox Bet, in this game. But these injuries could play a madness.
Certain states have no obstacles. We live in California. During the pandemic, we had a $75 billion surplus. You can grow anything in California. We can grow all our own food. We have Mediterranean weather. Our economy is the 5th biggest in the world in California. Significantly bigger than Canada, a country. Significantly bigger than 200 countries. It's the 5th biggest in the world because the Mediterranean climate, the proximity to the ports in the Pacific Ocean. You can grow everything here. We can grow all our own fruits and then sell them to you. More people live in LA County than 41 states. So we don't have a lot of obstacles here. We screw stuff up occasionally, but don't have obstacles. A lot of states have obstacles. Alaska, hard to grow your own stuff. Idaho, not much of a population or a tax base. There's financial limitations in Kentucky or Idaho or Vermont. Texas, you're not going to be able to grow stuff like we can. You don't have the Pacific Ocean as your neighbor. There's states that have obstacles, so don't be unrealistic about what it can do. There are companies that have obstacles. You just don't have funding. right? Some companies get funding, some don't. Banks have limitations when you compare them to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley companies can grow tech much faster than the highly regulated banking industry, okay? It's an obstacle. So your bank stock's not going to grow as fast as your Facebook generally or your tech stock. People have obstacles. If you grow up with abuse, in poverty, just getting a college degree in being a good person, you have perhaps overachieved. And there are people that come from, wild support, great this, great that. So everybody this morning wants to whack Utah. Oh, go, blow it up. Utah is really a great franchise. They're fantastic. They're the Green Bay Packers. They're Wisconsin football. Wisconsin football's never, ever, ever been the best team in college football. The fact they get to Rose Bowls and they're from a state with no high school football stars is unbelievable. Only 2 programs in college football do it. Oregon, they got Phil Knight, and Wisconsin. There's no high school football stars in their state, and they're top 10 all the time. Utah, you can't blow it up. Orlando tried that post-Dwight Howard. How'd it work? They're irrelevant. Utah's always relevant. They're just never great. The only time they've been great, in back-to-back years, they got the steal of the draft. Stockton in one draft, Malone in the other. And they almost won a championship. There was a guy named Michael Jordan that screwed everything up. Now, you can get rid of Quinn Snyder and get a new voice. That has been suggested. All right. I think he's ready to go, and maybe you're ready to get off of Quinn Snyder. I don't have a problem with that. But the Yankees and the Lakers, they don't have any obstacles. Big brands, a lot of money, a lot of revenue. They can blow it up. They can start over. They're attractive to free agents because of their history or their city, the entertainment connections. But, this idea that, listen, Utah's good. They lost Joe Ingles early in the year. Last year they lost Bogdanovich, and they're not a franchise that can lose a score. This is their ceiling. It's Wisconsin football. I used to cover the Portland Trail Blazers. It's geographically isolated. It's cold and wet in the winter. It's not a big free agent destination. You got to make a big trade. You got to steal somebody in the draft. You got to find a Damian Lillard in the draft. And then you got to get lucky in a big trade. Hopefully you're healthy. Not going to blow anything up. Listen, Dallas, Jalen Brunson is playing out of his mind. Spencer Dinwiddie is averaging 20 a night. And by the way, we have seen what Dallas is doing. Chris Paul got hurt. Chris Paul. Suns won like 11 of 17 games. Ja Morant got hurt. Grizzlies won like 18 to 20 games. Luka got hurt. Mavericks are winning some games. You can win without your star. Briefly. You're not going to win a championship. You're better eventually over the long term with your Ja Morant and your Chris Paul and your Luka. Let's not overreact to this stuff. Utah is relevant every year. Wisconsin football is relevant every year. They're in the Rose Bowl picture almost every year. But what are the expectations? There are obstacles in Utah in free agency. That's why they have to go so often to international to get some emerging stars. And they do a great job of that. And then that's why Wisconsin has to leave the state to go find their talent. But sometimes you just got to give another team credit. Like Dallas, Utah didn't play poorly. Utah became the first team, I think, in like 20 years last night to shoot 56% at home and lose. Like, they didn't play that terrible. I mean, Rudy Gobert, you're not going to just throw him away. He's an all-star. Donovan Mitchell's fantastic. But, there are these moments and these companies and these states where there is a ceiling, and I think Utah has done a remarkable job in my lifetime, like Wisconsin football, to get the very most out of their organization. I've never seen them win a championship. It may never happen. Utah got very close, and Wisconsin's gone and won Rose Bowls. But expectations are the direct correlation to happiness and sadness. Utah just can't afford to lose a guy like Joe Ingles or a Bogdanovich. You need every bucket you can get, and they don't have them. And Dallas right now is playing out of their minds. And whenever you lose your star, something happens. When you lose your Ja Morant, when you lose your Chris Paul, when you lose your Luka, what really happens, it's sort of unspoken. Coaches will tell you this. Everybody plays a little better defense. Everybody wants to show the coaching staff, hey, we're okay without that guy. And teams get this little rise. They always say this with interim coaches in football. The team always plays better with the interim coach because everybody's like, hey, man, that coach had it out for me. The interim guy is going to see everybody plays better with an interim football coach. And NBA teams all the time. Well, I shouldn't say all the time because LeBron, he left, but LeBron controlled the total offense for every team he's been on. A lot of times stars leave, and everybody plays a little above themselves for about 2-3 weeks. That's what Dallas is doing. Joy with the news.
No.
Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Well,